Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this committee hearing is about whether or not we're going to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress. I strongly recommend that we do, especially in pertaining to the release of the Epstein files and trying to get to the bottom of what exactly went on there and how Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to continue doing what he was doing and abusing so many people for so long. It's interesting when I look at the history of the Congress and look at the fact that Peter Navarro, former Trump trade advisor, who defied the January 6th committee subpoena, was sent to prison for 4 months. Steve Bannon, also a former Trump advisor, defied the January 6th committee subpoena. He was sent to prison for 4 months, and several others. So it's going to be really telling to see how my Democrat.
This may look like another partisan fight inside a committee room, but it's actually a stress test for congressional authority itself. What's really being tested here is whether subpoenas carry equal weight regardless of name, influence, or legacy. This raises broader questions about whether oversight functions as a neutral check on power or a selective tool used only when politically convenient. In this video, we'll break down how enforcement, precedent, and institutional credibility collide in this vote, and why the outcome matters far beyond one family or one hearing.
And before I recognize Mr. Crane, let me reply. We just got that email, and we have spent 5 months trying to get acceptable terms that I think everyone within any sense of fairness would agree needs to occur. After we hold this vote, hopefully it'll be a bipartisan vote. They're going to have 2 weeks before this bill is on the floor. They're going to have 2 weeks before the full House votes on it. And make no mistake, to the Clintons and their lawyers, this bill will pass, and I believe it will pass with Democrat votes, even though I've heard Democrat leadership is whipping to try to get you all to vote no on this. They have had 5 months to comply with this, and to defend the indefensible and try to act like Bill Clinton's a victim here, I think is a stretch. We know who the victims are, and I think if you ask the victims, do you want to hear from Bill Clinton? I'm pretty confident I know what the answer will be because our staff has communicated with their attorneys. Chair recognizes Mr. Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this committee hearing is about whether or not we're going to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress. I strongly recommend that we do, especially in pertaining to the release of the Epstein files and trying to get to the bottom of what exactly went on there and how Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to continue doing what he was doing and abusing so many people for so long. It's interesting when I look at the history of the Congress and look at the fact that Peter Navarro, former Trump trade advisor, who defied the January 6th committee subpoena, was sent to prison for 4 months. Steve Bannon, also a former Trump advisor, defied the January 6th committee subpoena. He was sent to prison for 4 months, and several others. So it's going to be really telling to see how my Democrat colleagues vote on this one. Mr. Comer, how many times, Mr. Chairman, how many times did Mr. Epstein go to the White House in your recollection, sir?
According to the evidence that we've obtained, it appears he went 17 times during the Clinton presidency.
Is that more times than you've gone to the White House, Chairman?
I've been member of Congress for 9 years, and fairly high up on the pecking order. I've been to the White House, I believe, 9 times in 9 years. So he went to the Clinton White House double the number of times that I've been to the White House in my entire congressional career.
Mr. Chairman, how many times did Mr. Clinton fly on Mr. Epstein's plane?
At least 26 times, according to the flight logs that were subpoenaed from the estate.
Right.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Those were 4 different trips, 4 trips, and every time they regassed the plane, they counted that as another trip. But it was Asia, Africa, and they had to refuel. So every time they stopped to refuel, they counted that as another leg of the trip. There are 4 trips, not 27.
That's almost like I didn't inhale.
Reclaiming my time. That's still enough trips for us to want to be able to ask the Clintons questions about their involvement with Epstein. Is that true, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Right. So, like I said, I hope that my Democrat colleagues who all of a sudden have found religion, this Congress, and now they want the Epstein files, even though over the last 4 years when they had control of Washington, D.C., you didn't hear a peep about Jeffrey Epstein out of any of them. And so I think it's going to be real telling, how my Democrat colleagues who claim to be all about the victims, how they actually vote on these contempt charges for the Clinton family. And I just think it's interesting, too, that, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is you've been working for the last 4 or 5 months to get the Clintons in here. Is that correct?
5 months, yes, sir.
Did Did they tell you that they would come in over December 24th and 25th, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day?
They have implied that they would come in, yes.
Okay, so that just goes to show that they're trying to dodge suggesting dates that they know none of us are in session. And I think that's pretty despicable. The other thing I believe that they said is that you and the ranking member could fly up to New York, but you couldn't record any of the conversations. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Does that sound like any congressional deposition you've ever heard of, sir?
No, and it would be my word against Mr. Garcia's, and I'm pretty confident I know whose side the New York Times would take, and the Washington Post would take, and MSNBC would take. And look, an investigation, you have to have transcripts, and the media wants transcripts. Well, you have to have transcripts. We don't do the notes. And the Clintons have already accused us of lying, and they accused us of saying this was an unlawful subpoena, which I appreciate Mr. Garcia admitting that it is a lawful subpoena. So I yield back.
I also want to point out one thing that I think has been pretty interesting. When I flew into Washington, D.C. yesterday, my chief of staff told me that he'd been contacted by the Clinton attorneys at least 3 times to try and stop this. So it looks as if they tried to resist you for about 5 months, and once we finally pulled the trigger on it, now they're realizing that this could go very poorly for them. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
That's how it appears, that they could stall, and then when it finally came to this vote, they felt like they could count on the Democrats objecting and a few of the Republicans that the media would go to, and the moderates, and say, oh, is this going to affect your election? Is this going to affect your election? At the end of the day, I think even the media wants to hear from Clinton. We all want to see the documents. So everyone in America that's keeping up with this, which is a majority of Americans, they want answers, and we're trying to get answers here today, and the Clintons have obstructed for 5 months. 5 months.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Tlaib. Oh, wait a minute. Ms. Randall, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to yield 30 seconds to the ranking member.
Thank you. I just want to, again, just clarify.
What unfolded in this hearing was not a casual exchange or a passing disagreement. It was a moment where the facade cracked. When Representative Eli Crane spoke about 5 months of resistance, delays, and carefully timed evasions, he wasn't just describing a scheduling dispute, he was describing a strategy that relies on power, prestige, and the quiet assumption that some names are simply too big to be challenged. The chairman's words set the stage with unmistakable clarity. 5 months. 5 months of negotiations, 5 months of attempts to establish what he called basic standards of fairness. And after all that time, after every courtesy extended, the message from the Clintons' legal team was still delay, still deflection, still resistance, not cooperation, not transparency, just time. Because in Washington, time is often the most effective shield. Then came the warning, delivered plainly and without hesitation. This bill will pass. It will pass the committee. It will reach the House floor. And it will do so even as party leadership pressures members behind closed doors. That statement mattered because it acknowledged something rarely said out loud in hearings like this: that political survival often outweighs public accountability, and that some votes are not cast on principle, but on instruction. Representative Crane's remarks pulled the camera back even further. He reminded the room and the country watching that Congress has not hesitated to enforce contempt charges when the targets lacked elite protection. He cited prior cases where subpoenas were ignored and consequences followed swiftly. Prison time, real penalties, no prolonged negotiations, no special accommodations. The contrast was impossible to ignore. That comparison wasn't rhetorical flourish. It was a challenge. If Congress claims to be a co-equal branch of government, then its authority must apply evenly, not selectively, not based on last names, past offices, or media influence. Equal treatment under the law is not a slogan. It's the foundation of legitimacy. Then the facts became even harder to dismiss. The number of visits, 17 trips to the White House during one presidency, a figure that exceeded the chairman's own visits over nearly a decade in Congress. Numbers like that don't prove wrongdoing on their own, but they demand explanation. In a system built on oversight, unanswered questions are not harmless. They are corrosive. When flight records were discussed, the room shifted again. Technical clarifications were offered, counting methods debated. But the core point remained untouched. There were multiple trips, there was repeated proximity, and there has been a sustained effort to prevent sworn testimony about those connections. That is the heart of this issue. Not speculation, not rumor, but resistance to scrutiny. What followed exposed the mechanics of avoidance in stark detail, suggested dates when Congress was not in session, proposals to meet privately without transcripts, conditions that would leave no official record, no accountability, no way for the public to verify what was said or promised. That is not how congressional oversight works. And everyone in that room knew it. The chairman's response was telling. Without transcripts, it would be one word against another. And in a media ecosystem where narratives are chosen before facts are examined, the outcome would be predictable. That acknowledgement revealed a deeper problem. Oversight does not exist in a vacuum. It exists within a media and political environment that often decides credibility before evidence is presented. Perhaps the most revealing moment came near the end. After months of resistance, once a vote became unavoidable, outreach suddenly intensified. Calls to staff, pressure behind the scenes. Attempts to stop the process at the last possible moment. That pattern speaks volumes. Delay until the threat becomes real. Then mobilize influence. This hearing was not just about one family or one set of documents. It was about whether the system still functions when it is tested by power. It was about whether accountability applies upward as firmly as it applies downward. And it was about whether Congress remembers who it serves. When Representative Crane said that Americans want answers, he wasn't exaggerating. Trust in institutions has eroded because too often the rules appear flexible for the connected and rigid for everyone else. Every delay reinforces that perception. Every exception deepens the divide between the public and the people who govern them. History will not remember the procedural excuses. It will remember whether Congress chose clarity over comfort, whether it chose principle over protection, and whether it proved that no individual, regardless of status or legacy, stands above lawful oversight. Moments like this define more than hearings. They define eras. They tell future generations whether accountability was defended or quietly abandoned when it became inconvenient. The question now is not whether the public is watching. They are. The question is whether those entrusted with power will meet that gaze without flinching. At Liberty Report USA, we believe transparency is not optional. It is essential. If you believe the truth matters, support our work to expose it. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.